I take it the deeper question is there a fact of the matter as to who's right? Not just as there's a fact of the matter as to whether or not there is a God and what that God is like. I take it there's a fact of the matter with regard to whether or not it's wrong to harm people, whether it's wrong to rape, for example. I think it's wrong to rape. I take this to not just be a matter of opinion. It's not as though if I thought otherwise rape would be okay, or if everybody thought otherwise rape would be okay. Rape is wrong, full stop. Here's a rather different objection that might get raised. We have the thought that morality involves commandments. We have the thought that morality involves requirements. We talk about moral laws. So sometimes it's suggested that where there's a commandment, there's got to be a commander. Where there's a law, there's got to be a lawgiver. Where there's a requirement, there's got to be a requirer. Who plays the role of commander, lawgiver, requirer? Well, it's got to be God. And so it turns out if we're really going to have the notion not just of moral reason to behave in this way or that way, but rather moral requirements to behave in one way rather than another way, then we need to appeal to God after all, to be the lawgiver. This is an argument that's been proposed by various theistic philosophers. Indeed, this very argument's been embraced by some atheistic philosophers who said, yeah, talk of moral requirements does presuppose a lawgiver. Now that I no longer believe in God, I believe there are no moral requirements. Now, I'm not myself inclined to go that way. I'm perfectly prepared to talk about moral requirements. I think it's a completely appropriate thing to do. In fact, it would be inappropriate, it would be just simply mistaken, full stop, to give up talk about moral requirements. So the question I want to push a little bit is it really true that requirements require a requirer? That's a mouthful. And I'm inclined to believe the answer to that is actually no. Let's take an example of a requirement outside the moral domain. I suppose that when we are engaged in reasoning about belief matters, theoretical reasoning, it's a requirement of appropriate reasoning that you not contradict yourself. People sometimes talk about the law of non-contradiction. I take this to be a requirement of rationality, that you not contradict yourself. Now, should we similarly conclude that since there's a requirement, there's a law of non-contradiction, there must be a lawgiver, there must be some cosmic logician who commands us not to contradict ourselves? Doesn't seem to me to be so. I mean, I can imagine that somebody does say that, but I don't myself feel the force of thinking if there's a law of non-contradiction, that is just to say there's a claim that it's just fundamentally irrational to contradict yourself, I don't see any reason to conclude from that there must be some cosmic logician laying down that law. As we might put it, the logic of the word requirement does not actually entail the existence of a requirer. That's at least seems to me the most natural thing to say about the law of non-contradiction. If we want, we can say, I don't think any harm in saying that reason itself requires that you not contradict yourself. And that's fine. I don't have any problem talking that way. That just, of course, doesn't, I mean, it's talking about reason in a somewhat personified fashion, but no harm done as long as we understand there doesn't actually have to be a person who laid down the law of non-contradiction. Well, similarly then, I want to say that with regard to the various moral requirements, we don't need a lawgiver for them to be genuine requirements. If we want, we can say, and in fact it seems to me a perfectly legitimate thing to say, that reason requires that we act in accordance with reasons. It lays down these various categorical reasons not to harm people, to aid them. And so we can personify reason in that way, but all we just mean, I think, is that there are these compelling, decisive, objective, categorical reasons to behave in certain ways and not behave in other ways.